Ladies and gentlemen, today we embark on a profound and unsettling journey into the realm of psychological research. A journey that takes us into the depths of human behavior, revealing experiments that, although groundbreaking, have severely pushed the limits of ethical standards. It's important that, as we delve into these controversial studies, we maintain a critical perspective on the fine line researchers tread between the pursuit of knowledge and the preservation of human dignity. If you're as intrigued by the darker side of psychological research as I am, then be sure to hit the subscribe button so you won't miss any of our explorations into the fascinating intricacies of the human mind. Let's begin with the notorious Stanford Prison Experiment, a study that has become synonymous with unethical psychological research. Conceived by psychologist Philip Zimbardo in 1971, this experiment sought to analyze the psychological effects of perceived power and the dynamics between prisoners and guards. It was more than just an academic endeavor. It was an immersive role play that transformed a basement at Stanford University into a mock prison. Participants, young men of good health and stable psychological backgrounds, were randomly assigned to play the roles of inmates or guards. But what ensued was beyond shocking. The guards, cloaked in the authority their roles bestowed upon them, spiraled into a pattern of increasingly abusive behavior. The prisoners, stripped of their personal identities by numeric labels and uniform attire, began to suffer severe emotional distress. Some were subjected to solitary confinement, humiliating tasks, and verbal assaults that bore heavy psychological repercussions. This experiment was supposed to last 2 weeks, but it was terminated after 6 days. Why? Because the line between simulation and reality had been obscured, and ethical boundaries had been not just crossed, but shattered. The repercussions were immediate and intense, prompting widespread criticism and dialogue on the ethical integrity of psychological experiments. Now, let me take you a few years back, before the events at Stanford, to meet Stanley Milgram, a psychologist curious about the extent of human obedience to authority. In the 1960s, Milgram designed a series of experiments that aimed to unravel just how far individuals would go when instructed by an authoritative figure. Participants believed they were part of a learning experiment and were ordered to administer electric shocks of increasing intensity to a learner, ostensibly to understand the effects of punishment on learning. In reality, the shocks were fake, and the learner was an actor, but the participants were unaware. The results were startling. A significant number of participants continued to administer shocks, even when the learner screamed in apparent pain and begged for mercy. Some participants were visibly distressed, trembling, or even laughing nervously, as they grappled with their moral instincts against the firm instructions of the researcher. The conclusion was grim. Ordinary people can be compelled to inflict harm on others if instructed to do so by an authority figure. As we reflect on these experiments, it's crucial to engage with the serious ethical concerns they raised. The deception, the lack of genuine informed consent, and the psychological distress inflicted upon the participants in the Milgram experiment all indicate a glaring disregard for ethical protocols in research. But where do these insights lead us? They unearth a profound and disturbing truth about human nature and the influence of authority, even in a simulated environment. It's a topic that continues to resonate, reminding us of the importance of rigorously enforced ethical standards in all forms of research. Before we examine more psychological experiments that blurred ethical boundaries, I would like to gently invite you to engage in the conversation below. If these experiments are shocking to you, Or if you're fascinated by the complexities they reveal about human nature, I encourage you to share your thoughts in the comments. Your perspectives enrich our understanding and dialogue about these contentious subjects. Continuing our exploration, we must not forget the haunting legacy left by the Little Albert experiment, a study that, at its core, defies foundational ethical considerations. Picture this. In the early 20th century, behaviorist John B. Watson, together with his assistant Rosalie Rayner, embarked on an endeavor to demonstrate the mechanics of classical conditioning. However, their subject was an infant, later known in psychological literature simply as Little Albert. This experiment ventured into the murky waters of fear and conditioning. The researchers presented Little Albert with a white rat, initially a neutral stimulus, eliciting no fear in the child. But soon, the rat's appearance was paired with a loud, frightening noise, leading to Little Albert associating the benign animal with a feeling of terror. The profound ethical issues here are glaring. The infant, unable to consent or withdraw from the study, was subjected to intentional psychological distress, all for the pursuit of academic understanding. The ramifications of Little Albert's induced phobia and the experiment's long-lasting impacts on his psychological development have been the subject of much speculation and concern. 8 decades later, the echoes of such flagrant ethical violation in psychological research still resonate, reminding us of the necessity to prioritize the well-being of research subjects, regardless of the potential advancements in knowledge. And then there's the infamous Tuskegee syphilis study, a sinister testament to the neglect of ethical standards on an institutional level. Initiated by the United States Public Health Service in 1932, this study was conducted over a harrowing 40-year period. Its subjects were African American men diagnosed with syphilis, men who were misled and deliberately deprived of effective treatment for the sake of observing the disease's full progression. The researchers of the Tuskegee study exploited their subjects' trust and vulnerability, withholding information and necessary medical treatment even when penicillin became the standard cure for syphilis. The experiment was only halted in 1972 following public outrage. Yet the damage had already been done, sowing seeds of distrust toward medical research within the African American community, a distrust that persists to this day. Taking a step away from human subjects, yet not away from controversy, we arrive at the Harlo monkey experiments, spearheaded by psychologist Harry Harlo in the mid-20th century. Harlo was determined to investigate the nature of love, specifically maternal love, and did so through wrenching studies on rhesus monkeys. Imagine infant monkeys, separated from their mothers, subjected to social isolation, and presented with surrogate mothers made of wire and cloth, designed solely to evaluate their responses to deprivation of maternal comfort. The ethical implications were and remain profound. These experiments painted a gruesome picture of psychological distress as the young monkeys exhibited signs of severe emotional trauma that raises questions about the ethical treatment of animals in research. The balance between scientific insight and moral responsibility was, once again, critically disrupted. The psychological community has since introduced stringent guidelines and institutional review boards in an effort to safeguard against such breaches of ethics. Yet the question hangs heavily in the academic air. At what cost do we seek understanding? The conversation on such ethically fraught topics doesn't collapse at the conclusion of a single exposition. but extends into iterative discussions and reflections. And so, if this deep dive into the murky ethics of psychological research has sparked a fire in your curiosity, or if it has stirred an emotional response within you, I invite you to like this video and share your reflections. Your engagement doesn't just support the channel. It fuels a larger conversation that is crucial for a shared understanding of our past and a reinvigoration of our commitment to an ethical future.